I'm Nima Rajan. The federal Liberals insist they intend to keep their campaign promises for the first 100 days of their new mandate. Parliament won't resume until next week, meaning the government will have lost almost 30 days since the new cabinet was sworn in. The Liberals promised more than a dozen initiatives in their election platform, including the introduction or reintroduction of at least 8 bills. And they will have only 24 sitting days in which to get things done before the 100-day clock runs out on February 3rd. Some members of Parliament say several security measures approved last fall have helped, but not all of them are feeling as reassured as they return to work. The House of Commons Board of Internal Economy has approved funding for home security evaluations and mobile panic buttons. That's on top of increased security on Parliament Hill following reports of politicians being harassed. More than 100 core federal public service workers could be put on unpaid leave today. Today is the deadline for those workers to have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. About 3,000 of the roughly 267,000 employees who declared their vaccination status have requested an accommodation. This so they can work without a full slate of vaccines. The CEO of the Business Council of Canada is one of several experts who wants to see Prime Minister Justin Trudeau take a harder line with the U.S. at Thursday's Three Amigos Summit in Washington. Goldie Hyder says he believes U.S. President Joe Biden is steering the bilateral relationship between the two countries toward the rocks. He's concerned that this puts North America at a competitive disadvantage compared to the rest of the world. Home sales shot up about 9% between September and October. The Canadian Real Estate Association reports that is the largest month-over-month increase since July of last year. The national average price of a home rose 18.2% year-over-year to over $716,000 in October. Manufacturing sales fell 3% in September to $58.5 billion. They were dragged down by a 35.6% drop in sales of motor vehicles. Statistics Canada reports vehicle sales fell due to the continuing pandemic-related shortage of semiconductors, which has hurt auto production. In a separate report, wholesale sales rose 1% in September to $71.3 billion. This was on the back of a 20.9% increase in sales in agricultural products. As many as 275 people are trapped between 2 mudslides on a British Columbia highway. The slides were triggered by a rainstorm that's been pounding the southern part of the province since Saturday. Vancouver's urban search and rescue team has been deployed. The team says about 50 children are in the group of people awaiting rescue. The storm severed numerous highways in BC and forced the evacuation of many homes. This includes an evacuation order issued to the entire city of Merritt. For the latest weather warnings, check Environment and Climate Change Canada's website. Alberta has become the latest province to sign on to a $10 a day universal childcare program. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Alberta Premier Jason Kenney made the joint announcement in Edmonton. The deal is for $3.8 billion in federal funding over the next 5 years. Childcare fees are to be halved by next year and reduced to an average of $10 a day by 2026. Mr. Kenney says the Alberta agreement will make the subsidies eligible for all types of licensed childcare facilities up to kindergarten. All right, well, meanwhile, Ontario is a major holdout on the federal government's $10 a day childcare plan. Education Minister Stephen Lecce says the province does want a deal, but it is negotiating for more money. He says Ontario wants any agreement to factor in the province's full-day kindergarten program. Non-vaccinated Health Network employees in Quebec have lost their request for an injunction against the province's vaccine mandate. Today's Quebec Superior Court ruling comes nearly 2 weeks after Premier François Legault's government suspended the health order. This was due to concerns it would significantly reduce services in the overburdened system. Quebec is now requiring unvaccinated staff to be tested 3 times a week and for new hires to be fully vaccinated. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey has christened 2022 as the Come Home Year. Mr. Furey unveiled a marketing campaign for the idea in St. John's. He also introduced Heidi Bonnell and comedian Rick Mercer as Come Home Year co-hosts. Newfoundland and Labrador has hosted at least 2 province-wide Come Home Years in the past. This while towns and communities in the province often host their own Come Home Year events. Stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Last-minute changes diluting crucial language about coal has been accepted by 200 nations at the Glasgow climate talks. Several countries say they were deeply disappointed by the change promoted by India to phase down rather than phase out coal power, the single biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. COP26 President Alok Sharma says the deal is a move in the right direction. In addition to the revised coal language, the Glasgow Climate Pact included financial incentives for poorer nations and solved a long-standing problem to help pave the way for carbon trading. Well, joining us today is Ms. Lisa Gu, the National Policy Manager at the David Suzuki Foundation. Ma'am, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Good to be back with you.
So firstly, can you guide our viewers through the major decisions or policies in the Glasgow Climate Pact?
This was a very important 2-week global meeting of countries who have pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and at such a crucial moment for climate action. A main task, as you said in the intro, was to define the rules for international carbon markets. And here, COP26 did adopt some basic social and environmental integrity standards to avoid, for example, double counting of emission reductions, and set in motion, at least, the building blocks to develop some systems here. There was also, as you mentioned in the introduction, a focus on international climate financing. Here, unfortunately, developed countries still came up short. It's been more than a decade now since developed countries pledged $100 billion a year to support developing countries in facing climate change, and developed countries have yet to fully deliver on that pledge. There were some new commitments made, and it is very important to continue a focus on providing that funding, and not only for reducing emissions around the world, because this is a global problem, but also in supporting poorer countries in facing the effects of climate change that have now become irreversible. Another important outcome from the conference was a commitment to return next year with the goal for countries to return next year with the goal of setting more ambitious emission reduction plans, which kind of speaks at the same time to the failure of COP26 to deliver the level of ambition needed to make the kind of difference we need to see. And finally, I would add that apart from the formal program at COP and the formal agreements, there were some very interesting and important side agreements, alliances formed between different countries. Very significantly, an agreement among many countries, including Canada, to end public support for foreign fossil fuel developments by the end of 2022. So that's a faster timeline than we'd seen in previous commitments, and a more comprehensive commitment, and also growing momentum to phase out coal-fired electricity, which is one of the worst climate offenders. And beyond that, a new international alliance called the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance that a small number of countries have signed up for. Canada is not at that table, but Quebec, the province of Quebec, did sign on. And these, I would say, are the countries leading countries to really now talking about the need to phase out fossil fuels.
Just over a minute left, ma'am, but I want to jump to the final text. We're seeing a lot of criticism around the text and the phrasing in this text. So phasing out coal was replaced with phasing down coal. So how exactly did COP26 address the issue of coal and fossil fuel subsidies overall?
Yeah, that was a disappointing compromise for sure. And, you know, I think on the whole, COP26 is widely recognized as as a compromise and not going far enough. But if there's a silver lining, maybe it is that is widely recognized. And I think we're starting to see a bit of a turning point, perhaps, where the countries of the world are converging around the need to do more. With respect to coal, surprisingly, this is actually the first time that fossil fuels have been named in a COP declaration. So, it is at least getting us closer to addressing the source of the problem, which is fossil fuels. But that language and those commitments do need to be strengthened. And really, what it comes down to is implementation. So we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on the Canadian government as Parliament reconvenes next week to make sure it delivers on all of its commitments and more to reducing emissions.
All right, Ms. Gu, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your insight.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. The month of November is Diabetes Awareness Month. Diabetes is known to be one of the most common conditions affecting Canadians. According to Diabetes Canada, the chronic condition was estimated to affect 9.3% of Canadians in 2015, but is predicted to rise to 12.1% by 2025, representing a 44% increase. However, researchers are continuing to look for ways to potentially cure or improve living with the disease. Innovations in diabetes management technology, such as a continuous glucose monitor, continue to improve the lives of those affected. But with the pandemic in play during the past 2 years, how have people with this medical condition been affected? Well, joining us now to talk more on the current state of diabetes care in Canada is Dr. Seema Nagpal, Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you.
So let's start with a quick overview of what exactly diabetes is and how it has affected Canadians throughout the years.
Yeah, it's really important to understand what diabetes is. It's a disease that's well known, but not known well. Type 1 diabetes is a disease in which the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin. The cause of type 1 diabetes is pretty much unknown. What is known is that it is not caused by eating too much sugar or any of the myths like that. It isn't preventable. Researchers do believe that type 1 diabetes occurs when the body's immune system destroys the cells that produce insulin. And that's a little bit different than type 2 diabetes, which is much more common. And that's when the pancreas either can't effectively use or produce enough insulin. And that's what occurs in about 90 to 95% of Canadians living with diabetes. And unfortunately, there's a stigma and a perception that type 2 diabetes is really a behavioral problem or a lifestyle choice problem. But the cause of type 2 diabetes is really complex. It's a complex interplay of genetic, behavioral, and environmental factors.
And it's believed 1 in 3 Canadians are living with diabetes or pre-diabetes, and in some cases they might not even know that they have this condition. So what are some identifying symptoms of diabetes?
That's right. It's really underappreciated, I think, that diabetes can occur without a health crisis. And so people don't always know to talk about these things with their doctor, and therefore their doctor isn't able to help them manage the condition. So some of the symptoms that people might experience is an unusual thirst, frequent urination, weight change, a sudden weight gain or weight loss, extreme fatigue, blurred vision. And as you can see, these symptoms aren't very specific. They could be a result of a few different things. So any changes in your health should really be discussed with your doctor in order to really tease out what's going on.
And we mentioned that the number of people with diabetes is expected to rise in Canada. Why is that, doctor?
Well, I think that's a good news, bad news story. The good news is that people living with diabetes are living longer than they ever have. So when we count the number of people with diabetes in Canada, those people are still in the count. So that's great news. The bad news is that more and more people are becoming diagnosed with diabetes. And so that's the thing that we really want to address. And understanding that complex interplay that I referred to of environmental factors, behavioral factors, and genetic factors is something that we really need to tease apart and understand a bit better. And then start to target those problems, whether they're societal or system problems that occur that allow us to be more sedentary and less active through our day, that actually encourage us to be less physically active, and those things that kind of force us or encourage us to eat in unhealthy eating patterns. We know that we're bombarded with messages to eat high energy foods with low nutritional value. We're bombarded with easy, fast food. So we really need to make some societal changes to make sure that living in a healthy way is the easy path, not the most difficult way to live.
All right, ma'am, just about 45 seconds left here, but what kind of steps can our officials take to improve diabetes care in Canada?
I think that one of the things that we really need to do is take a comprehensive look at the things that we can do to prevent and help people manage living with diabetes. And that's going to require kind of all hands on deck, from individuals knowing the risks and taking steps to reduce their own personal risk, but as well governments to change the environment in which we live. So it's actually not a disease-producing environment, but a health-producing environment.
All right, we'll be back with more news from around the world only on Forum Daily, so stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. The British government has raised the country's terror threat level to severe. That's after 4 men believed to be associates of a male passenger who was killed when a taxi exploded outside a women's hospital in Liverpool were arrested on terrorism charges. The blast happened yesterday morning, just before the Remembrance Sunday service began at a nearby cathedral. Home Secretary Priti Patel told reporters that the threat level increase came in the context of this being the second terrorist incident in the space of a month. She did not elaborate. Closing arguments are expected today at the trial of a teenager accused of killing 2 men and wounding a third during street protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Kyle Rittenhouse's trial has underscored bitter divisions in the U.S. on the issues of guns, protests, and policing. The governor has deployed about 500 National Guard troops to Kenosha in case of unrest following a verdict. American journalist Danny Fenster has been released from a prison in Myanmar and is on his way home. Mr. Fenster had been sentenced to 11 years of hard labor after being convicted on Friday of spreading false or inflammatory information, contacting illegal organizations, and violating visa regulations. The sentence for the managing editor of the online magazine Frontier Myanmar was the harshest yet among 7 journalists known to have been convicted since a military coup in February. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has filed his candidacy for a Senate seat in next year's elections. He previously vowed that he would retire from politics when his term ends. The announcement on Monday prompted rights groups to say the leader is working to evade accountability for his deadly anti-drug campaign while in office. Mr. Duterte is known for his extra tough approach to criminality and illegal drugs. He launched an anti-drugs crackdown after winning the presidency in 2016. It has left more than 6,000 dead. India has begun to allow fully vaccinated foreign tourists to enter the country on regular flights. This for the first time since March 2020. That's when it imposed one of the toughest lockdowns in the world in an attempt to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. India was the second worst hit country with the virus after the U.S., but infections have fallen and vaccinations are up. Austria has taken what its leader has called a dramatic step of implementing a nationwide lockdown for non-vaccinated people who haven't recently had COVID-19. The move, which took effect at midnight, prohibits people 12 and older who haven't been vaccinated or recently recovered from leaving their homes. There are exceptions for basic activities like working, grocery shopping, going for a walk, or getting vaccinated. The lockdown is initially being imposed until November 24th. Royal Dutch Shell has proposed moving its headquarters from the Netherlands to the United Kingdom and streamlining its structure. The energy giant that has been incorporated in the UK with Dutch tax residency said today that the changes mean it would no longer use Royal Dutch in its name. Dutch officials say they are unpleasantly surprised by the move. Turkey's deputy president says his country is, quote, not afraid of anyone and won't be deterred from continuing to drill for oil and gas in disputed waters. This has been a tension point between Turkey and ethnically divided Cyprus. Deputy President Fuat Oktay made the comments on Monday. This was during a ceremony to mark the 38th anniversary of the Turkish Cypriot Declaration of Independence. Mr. Oktay's remarks come after the Cypriot government said that various energy companies would resume drilling. Ethiopia's war is over a year old, and no one knows how many thousands of people have been killed. But one ethnic Tigrayan in the diaspora has been compiling a list of names with more than 3,000 so far. An ethnic Amhara group has a separate list of almost 2,000. Experts say that is just a small fraction of the real toll. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is urging Russia to be more transparent about its military activities near Ukraine. But he stopped short of suggesting that Moscow might be preparing to invade Ukraine. Ukraine claims that Russia kept tens of thousands of troops and equipment near their common border after conducting war games earlier this year. Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014 and has backed a separatist insurgency in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Stoltenberg appealed to Russia on Monday to help prevent escalations and reduce tensions. All right, that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.